oh my God, did I miss it? Did I miss the chance? Did I miss the opportunity? This area changed quite a bit in the edit.
Freaking amazing.
That gives the scenes a certain degree of tension.
What made Celine choose you out of all of the candidates that she interviewed?
It's funny, I actually asked her about this.
Keith Fraase has edited for Terrence Malick, worked on Severance, and cut the upcoming material lists. Today, he shares his thought process behind editing the Oscar-nominated Past Lives, breaking down key scenes.
Celine's always saying it's a movie about adults trying their best to be adults, you know? And that's a very, very rare thing. It's so hard, I think, in films to make conflict out of that. So you often have adults behaving badly or adults behaving like children. And what I love about this movie is that it is like, yeah, everyone's trying their best to be as mature and understanding and compassionate as possible. And that in and of itself is difficult and creates conflict. And that just really, really resonates with me and how I approach my daily life. Like trying my best to be an adult, feeling insecure and like a child inside, but doing everything I can to be a grown up. And I just feel like these characters are all trying to do that in their own way. You know, this is where young Nora and young Hae-sung, when they're 12 years old, are saying goodbye as she's just told him that she's going to be, leaving Korea and immigrating to Canada for the first time. This area changed quite a bit in the edit, and specifically at the very end, there's a moment I kind of want to point out that I love what we ended up with. So this is all kind of the same. This was all sort of, from the very first cut, this sort of flow and getting, how we were going to arrive in Canada for the first time. The way Celine and I would talk about these sequences were in terms of musicality, how they would flow as if they were a musical piece. And so this whole sort of montage of arriving in North America for the first time, we always knew that after they said goodbye, we wanted a piece of music to kind of carry us into, across the ocean and into North America and into Canada. There was a whole scene of them arriving at their house for the first time, their new house. It's all dark, because the lights haven't been turned on yet because, some mistake that had happened. The kids are very excited because they're playing with flashlights, but the parents are a little concerned. Oh no, this is how we've arrived into our new home for the first time. And it's a really beautiful scene, but we decided that we wanted to cut it out just because it was kind of interrupting the musical flow of the moment. We knew that we wanted the music to carry us all the way through here until we reached the jump in time that's about to happen when we jump in time 12 years. And it also took us out of Nora's perspective. We were always talking about perspective and whose perspectives we're in. And it's always either going to be Nora's perspective or Hae-sung's perspective, right? And sometimes those are intertwined. But we want to stay with Nora, we want to stay with what she's feeling. And my favorite moment comes here. This was always supposed to lead us into a scene that was supposed to be the final scene of the youth section. What was supposed to be here, there's a scene between two young boys that come up and basically make a crude and kind of racist comment to Nora. She's ignorant to what they're implying or what they're saying to her, but it's just you can just tell that she's going to encounter racism, rudeness, it's going to be a difficult road, in this new land that she's was excited about. And it's sort of like the first moment, and it's sort of like a sexually explicit comment the young boys make, which is also just implying like everything she's about to face in this new world. Again, very, very well written scene. The performances were fine, but it was getting in the way of the flow of this moment and what we were trying to do. We want to cut out the scene, but we don't know. Well, we need a button. There needs to be a nice strong button to the end of this section, right? And it wasn't until we found this shot, this close-up of Nora, which was not shot with any intention. She's sitting there, she's looking uncomfortable, she's looking around. And what I love about this is all a mistake. This was filmed because they had called action. The other two boys who were supposed to come on and do the scene were either not in the right place or they couldn't be found or something. And so they just kept the camera rolling and they went off to go find these two young boys to get them to do the scene. And they just forgot to yell, cut. And that's just the actress sort of sitting there looking uncomfortable, not sure of what she wants to do. And we realized it was this perfect moment to show her feeling like she was uncomfortable, apart and separate from these other kids who were playing. And that spoke all the it said everything we needed to say in that one little beat, in that one little shot, that she was always going to feel like a little bit of an outsider in this new place. Anyway, and it ends up being one of my favorite moments in the whole movie. And I just love that it was an accident. It's footage that we would have thrown away. otherwise, but we just happened to like stumble upon it one day. We were looking for a solution to this moment.
Freaking amazing. Those heads and tails of the shots, right? Sometimes there is gold. There is gold hidden in those moments where when there is no direction, like no direction from the director for the actors. Is just like them being them in the moment. And it can, like, I love this. I love, like, this is like pure, the essence of editing.
Yeah, that's my favorite kind of thing is, I always tell people, if you find a moment that resonates for you without any understanding of why it resonates with you, just put it in a bin somewhere, put it at the end of a sequence, just put it somewhere. I always have what I call my boneyard at the end of a sequence. So I'll be editing stuff, and anything I think is interesting, I just toss into the boneyard, and it's always there at the end of a sequence for me. It gets a little messy, but it's just there. It must have been in Walter Murch's book. I remember he used to talk about, back when editors would edit on film, the way you would find a shot, you would take all any of the unused material or the heads and tails of shots, and those would all be taped together on a reel somewhere, right? And so if you wanted to go find a different take or something, you'd have to fast forward on the Kim or on the Steenbeck or whatever you were on the Moviola, whatever you were editing on. You'd have to fast forward through all that material to find the shot you were looking for. And he said he found there was so much he got out of those searches. Because even if you're fast forwarding, you're watching stuff and you're catching things and you're remembering things and it's sparking ideas. I mean, there's a little bit of problem now with digital, editing and filmmaking. You can just, I want that shot. I just click on it and it calls it up. You're not having to search through footage. So it's always good to kind of go back and look through things, because as you're editing, you're needing new things that you didn't think you needed before. If you're encountering issues that need solutions, that's where you'll find the solutions. Is you'll find the stuff that you weren't expecting by looking through footage that way. I love it when things are repurposed outside of their original intentions, and then all of a sudden they make something, that's the magic of filmmaking. This was one of those scenes where they shot a lot of coverage of it. They shot it from a lot of different angles, a lot of different close-ups, a lot of front-on close-ups. It was kind of through working through it that we finally decided, we're going to stick to these kind of profile shots and try to mirror these different actions, and we're going to try to cut over as little as possible. This was one of the first scenes where Selena and I really delved into this idea of okay, we want to hold on shots as long as we possibly can and only cut over for the story to advance. If you're cutting back and forth and cutting through the coverage without it being intentional, the scenes feel interminable. They feel so long, and it's actually cutting less and holding on shots longer that gives the scenes a certain degree of tension. If you're on an over the shoulder and you're looking at somebody, you're not getting to see the other person's reaction. So if I'm sitting with somebody as they're telling me a story or telling me something important, there's an inherent tension of okay, when is the camera going to cut? When am I going to see what that other person is feeling or thinking? On the Haesung side, you can't really see Nora's face because she's in shadow. And we realized that we were getting so much out of that, not seeing what her emotions were at any given time. Greta Lee gave a lot of varied performances in this. And in a lot of different takes, she cried. She got really emotional as she was saying that they have to end this relationship, that it's not working for her, that she has other commitments she wants to do in her life. She got very emotional a lot of these takes, and it was very, very good, very, very powerful. But it was through working through this that we realized, I think it's better to hold that emotion back, let her be a little bit more measured, not let her break down, let her crumble. That's something we realized throughout the whole film, that we wanted to have that cathartic release at the very, very end. So we decided to kind of craft her performance and carve her performance here into a less emotional performance in that way. It's still emotional and still intense, but it's not, she's not sobbing. She's not fighting through tears. And I think that also allows us in this scene to be with Haesung a little bit more. See, really feel his reaction as he's getting this news that you can tell is really devastating to him. And this is one of those shots, the one we're on right now, that we were let us hold this as long as possible. I really love the length of time that we're on this shot, because we're on it, we're sitting with him, he's realizing everything, he's giving an incredible performance, and we don't cut away. It's we lean back with him, go with him, really stay with him for this whole moment, and we don't cut away until the moment's broken, right?
미안해.
뭐가 미안해? 우리가 뭐 사귀기나 했냐?
He's going through such a range of emotions here. And it's right when he decides to end the call that we cut out.
그래. 잘 가라.
And then we're out to her. And anyway, that's like one of my favorite things that we did in the editing of the movie, which just the choice to stay on him that whole time. She gets a little bit more emotional here. She doesn't cry, but like this is the first time we're out of that profile shot, and we don't get to see her full emotion. We don't get to see what she's feeling. We only get to see her from behind here. All these choices that I'm talking about are all things that we always knew that this was going to be the final shot of the scene, but we had a lot of other choices to make. It was through a lot of discussion with Celine that we figured out, oh, this is going to be the roadmap through this scene and how we're going to make our way through this scene in a very intentional and deliberate sort of way. Probably my favorite scene in the movie is when Arthur and Hae-sung meet for the first time. This moment here, where Arthur sees Hae-sung for the first time, is literally the first time that John Magaro, this moment right here where he kind of flinches, is where John Magaro and Teo like met for the first time. Celine's talked about this in interviews plenty of times before, but she had kept them apart throughout all of shooting because she wanted to protect this moment. She actually wanted them to meet for the first time on camera. So the actors have been hearing about each other from Greta, from the crew, from Celine herself, but they'd never met in person. And it's just funny that it actually worked out. Like the actual first take of them seeing each other was something that we were able to use in the film. And it never got more potent than that. And then again, this scene we're trying to be very deliberate about when we're cutting to each character, when we're using close-ups, when we're using the wide shot. Like each character gets one close-up in the scene. It's all for like a very important moment. Like Nora and Arthur are having this moment, like connecting eyes. We're trying to be deliberate about where we're using the close-ups and like making sure it's for a particular connecting sort of purpose. So there's a moment when like Arthur has a close-up with Hae-sung and they're connecting for the first time. And there's a moment when Greta has a close-up with Arthur, and it's when they're connecting over like a shared understanding of something. Again, it's just things I love to talk about because it's what we talk about in the editing room. This scene had so much coverage. They shot this over 3 days, I think. There's a lot of stuff that was cut out of the scene, like a lot of lines, kind of how Celine does it. She puts a lot of dialogue into it, and we always like strip it back to its bare essentials. This one was more of in terms of editing, it was like, how are we going to progress how are we going to progress to these different shots? And everything has a certain intention to it. So we always knew, okay, we're going to start with this. This is the widest shot we got. We're going to start with this, kind of just sit with them for a moment. And then I'm really happy with how the next shot turned out, because there were several scenes in this movie where Celine and Xavier, the cinematographer, they put the camera on this sort of like, they would just like kind of pan the camera back and forth. There wasn't a whole lot of like forethought to it. It was just kind of like, let's just pan it back and forth and kind of catch these different moments. And it just happened that this particular take caught this lovely moment where like, we're on here with Arthur and Nora. We're seeing them as a couple. And then Arthur is cut out of the conversation. And we're feeling him being cut out of the moment, as Nora and Hae-sung are she's trying to translate for him, but she's getting more like, it's the translation is getting more tough. She's kind of getting more into a conversation with him. And then we go back to see, how Arthur's reacting to that. That was a very deliberate thing of like cutting out, what it's like to cut out Arthur. And then he sort of disappears from the conversation. And this was a whole editorial thing. How are we going to have Arthur, his presence felt in the scene, but we need to forget about him. We need to feel that the moment is become like, like there's this intense moment between the two of them and Arthur's on the outside of it, right? All of these things are very deliberate choices of like how we're cutting into these shots, seeing a little bit of Arthur there, coming out here so that we know he's still there, but he's on his phone. He's not part of this conversation. And then after that moment, he's going to be completely cut out until we cut to his close-up. There's not a whole lot to talk about here, except that we're just hanging on these shots, again, for as long as possible, letting Hae-sung have his moments, being patient with it, calm with it. So this we worked on a lot. Is like, when do we bring Arthur back in, and how long can we sit on him without it becoming ridiculous, or without it becoming that he's like, or where we're being mean to Arthur, because it's like he is clearly being cut out of this conversation. We play with the length of his shot a lot. Like, what are the lines that are falling over him? What is it that he's hearing? We're trying to be, and also, like, you know, they film lots of close-ups on him, and it's like trying to find that perfect close-up that shows, like, okay, maybe he's understanding some of this, maybe he's not understanding any of it, but whatever it is, he's feeling a lot of emotions here. And then we break the line and we cut over to the other side. So that's a whole other conversation of, like, when do we break the line? When do we get into this? Like, I find this shot on Haesung to be incredibly iconic. Just the way they shot it, the way the light's falling on his face, his performance. And so early on, we're like, okay, this is when we have to cut over. That was not a decision made during filming. It was something like we discovered in the editing room. Here's where we're going to cut over, and we're going to stay on this side of the line, and we're never going to cut back to the other side until the moment breaks. We're just going to be in these tight close-ups until the moment's over with. I don't speak Korean. My assistant editor didn't speak Korean. Celine obviously speaks fluent Korean. She wrote the thing. But, like, you know, when I was working on my early assemblies of this, I was very nervous about this. I was like, how am I going to edit a film that I don't speak the language in? And actually ended up being pretty easy because you can kind of follow along. There's not a whole lot, there's not a whole lot of improvising on these sets, except in this scene, because this scene has long monologues, and so it's very hard to keep track of where all the lines are. And there was a different shot of him when he's saying this particular moment right here, when he's saying these monologues. There was a moment where he gets a little choked up. He gets incredibly embarrassed. He kind of recomposes himself and keeps talking. And I thought it was this beautiful, beautiful performance. And so I put it into my assembly. And when I was showing Celine the first time, she started laughing at this moment. I was like, well, what happened? I thought there was a beautiful performance. And it turns out that Teo, the actor, had messed up his line, shaken it off, and, like, restarted the scene. And I, of course, had no idea. I was like, oh, damn it. I thought it was this beautiful moment.
From the top. He took it from the top.
He took it from the top. I was like, oh, I just thought it was like a very long, it was just a long moment. It was great. Yeah, this is all, again. And so, and most of the work that we did on this scene was all just, like, finding the right performances. Again, not letting Greta be overly, like, too emotional, letting her be more, what I love about her so much in the shot is she's very confident and assured in what she's saying to him. She's like, this is a very intense, loving moment, but they're not crying. They're not mourning something. They've both come to understanding and realization, and they're both accepting it as, adults who care for one another. And I just love that. You see them being full grown-ups, and I don't know. It's just like the performances till this day give me chills, I just think that there's just something so beautiful and honest about their eyes and their faces. And it's funny watching it without sound right now. I'm right back in that place because it was so fun for me to cut when I don't speak the language, because it allows me as the editor I'm not focusing on what they're saying. I'm literally just focusing on their eyes and their facial expressions, how they're saying things. And you can pick up so much from that. And the only last thing to say about this scene is, after Greta gets up and leaves, we get to this wide shot. And so this scene between Arthur and Haesung used to go on a lot longer. And we used to cut into coverage. They shot close-ups on both of these guys so that they could have their own little scene. And it wasn't until deep into the editing process that we were like, you know what? We've done that. We've been in this moment with Haesung and Nora. Let's make this moment special by just being out here wide. We started talking about the idea, like, can we do this? And I was like, wait, we described this moment as sort of like a samurai standoff or like a gunslinger standoff in, like, the old Westerns. There's something about, like, who's going to talk first? What are they going to say to each other? And there's a lot of tension in that, and, like, not seeing their full faces. And that's why we love this shot so much. It was like, oh, we don't get the full... Again, it's withholding information. We don't see Arthur's face entirely, so we don't entirely know what he's feeling. We're only seeing Haesung's face from profile, so we don't entirely get to know everything he's feeling. We don't get full access to this moment. And I think that makes it a little bit more tense, but also more dynamic and interesting. It allowed you to read into it more. And also, the scene used to go on further to where after Arthur says that they're both Inyeon, or Haesung says that they're Inyeon, Haesung starts to cry. He breaks down a little bit more, and it's a very, very emotionally raw moment. And we decided not to let it go that far because we thought everything had been said. They're both Inyeon. They're reaching out to each other. They're touching each other, in a very spiritual sort of way. It's another one of my favorite moments of the movie, and I'm just like so happy we were just like, you know what, let's be bold and we'll just kind of stay out of this and let them have their moment together, and we'll kind of be on the outside watching it from afar.
The right thing to do.
It's perfect. And like not letting their emotions play completely actually makes the emotions stronger very often. It's like, you know, with that example of like a bad guy in a movie, right? And if you want him to be scary, right? You imagine he would shout and, you know, scream at everyone and would be like, you know, put your hands in the air, I'm gonna shoot you, or something like that, right? But actually the more scary version of that is when he's like composed and he's like, put your hands in the air, right? Like if he's composed, actually it's more of a threat. And I think it plays with that aspect of crying as well. If you want it to be like very emotional, then overusing crying actually backfires, I think.
A lot of times crying in movies bothers me because sometimes you feel, again, coming from like an acting background.
Yes.
Like that was one of the things I was never good at. I could never cry. So I was always trying to force myself. Can I cry? Can I get there? Can I get the tears? And then I realized like, oh, so often I feel with actors, like I feel the tears being presented to me. Hey, look at this, look how authentic it is. Like, oh my God, I've reached a point of crying. But then when you think about, I mean, I don't know how everyone else is, but when I actually do cry or I'm really emotional, I am trying so hard not to cry. And that's what we were going for in Past Lives, is everyone's trying to hold everything in. And at the end with Greta, she just can't anymore. She collapses in her husband's arms, you know?
But that's why it's so powerful then, because it was withheld for the whole time, right? It's one of those films that I truly resonated with. That's why I reached out to you. I just wanted to talk to you about this movie. You actually went through like an interview process, right? For Past Lives. Do you have like a guess, or do you know what made Celine choose you out of all of the candidates that she interviewed?
It's funny, I actually recently asked her about this, where I was like, you know, Celine, I know that you interviewed a lot of editors, and I know like a lot of editors who have a lot more, like who have credits that are much more closer to what you were looking for. Like, why did you end up choosing me? And she actually said that the reason, like the thing that really convinced her was, I'm not sure, I wasn't quite sure how to take this, but she said it was when she learned that both my parents are accountants, that's what I came from, that I come from like a very like logical, like math sort of background. And that's kind of what she was looking for. She was looking for someone who's very grounded, someone who'd sort of ground her a little bit and like help her kind of like think through things. During our interview, I think she picked up on the fact that I'm a fairly even keel kind of individual. And that's just what she was looking for. And she really loved that, you know, because, you know, Celine from day one, like really knew the movie that she wanted to make. I mean, she didn't have hardly any experience at all in filmmaking. And she was very open with that. And she was very honest with herself and with the rest of her crew about like what she didn't know, which I think is a very like, is a wonderful aspect to have as a director, not faking it. Like
it's a superpower.
Yeah. It's like, hey, here's what I don't know. I need your help in this aspect of it. But when it came to the vision and what she was trying to do, she totally had that in hand. So she was looking for collaborators who would just help, you know, kind of help clarify and maybe shape that vision a little bit, willing to go along this ride with her. So I guess I gave off that impression. And I guess the fact that my parents are accountants was something that she was like, you know what, this guy's got some sort of head on his shoulders. I feel good about going on this journey with him.
Unbelievable. Do you remember how you prepared for the interview? I mean, obviously you read the script, but I'm wondering, like, during the interview, did you have like questions about the script or?
Yeah, so I prepared for that interview the same way I actually prepare for every interview. So I always read the script at least twice, if not a third time. And I try to figure out what it is. I try to find a way to enter into the script. Like what is it that I can bring to this? Like, and how do I relate to it, basically? And so Past Lives is a great example of a film. Like I'm not an immigrant. I don't have that aspect of it. You know, that I don't come to the film with that aspect of myself. But Past Lives is a very universal film. You don't have to be an immigrant to connect with it. There's a lot of, it's all about, you know, paths that you walked in your life that you didn't take, you know, and like the wondering what might have been. You know, I have had like, you know, intense relationships in my past and choices that were made that I'm always like, well, you know, I'm really happy with where I'm at in my life. I love my, you know, just like Nora and Arthur in Past Lives, like I'm in a, you know, happy long-term relationship with my wife. But I do, you know, as I think everyone does, we wonder like what would our lives have been if I walked down these different paths? So anyway, I try to like relate to the script in those terms and say like, this is what really moves me and where I, like what affects me. I was very taken with the Arthur character, or at least he was the one that I really gravitated towards, in that when he first appears in the script, you think, oh, okay, I get what this guy's going to be. I know he's the spoiler, he's the villain. And then it kind of quickly becomes apparent like, oh, wait a second. No, he's trying his best to be understanding. He's trying his best to like offer his partner, what she needs. And that's what I thought was like really unique and special. I mean, there's a lot of things that are special about the film, but that was the first thing that I kind of like resonated with me. Like, oh, I see this as something completely different. And, and I can imagine myself in that situation with my wife. And like, I remember my wife and I went to her as a 10, 15 year high school reunion, one of her high school reunions, I don't know. And it was the first time I was meeting one of her exes. And it's funny because her ex is also someone who either had been in the film industry or had always had aspirations, to go into the film industry. And it's like somebody who was in a lot of ways very similar to myself. So anyway, it's just very interesting, like that experience of having to go, okay, I'm meeting this other part of my spouse, part of her life that I have no access to, right? So I remember I brought that up in the interview too, like those kind of things in my history that resonate when I read the script. That's how I prepared for the script. I just, read it over and over and think about it a lot and try to see what it is that I can bring in terms of perspective.
I know that like New York stuff was shot first, right? You basically edited the ending of the film before the beginning of it. Would you prefer it would be the other way around, or do you find it actually useful to edit like, the second half first?
I don't know if I know like whether or not it would be more useful if the Korean stuff was shot first. I mean, maybe it was hard to get a gauge. Like when I first showed, I showed her an assembly of the movie without any of the Korean stuff in it. Although a lot of like the stuff of Haesung in Korea in the second section where they're Skyping back and forth, a lot of that takes like they actually shot in New York just because they built like a little stage for it. So some of that stuff we were able to do. But of course, there's no way to get like a feeling or a flow of what the full film is going to be when you're missing the first chunk, right? So that was a little awkward, but I will say it was incredible. What was incredibly useful is, Celine went through, did all this New York stuff. I was by myself assembling it. And then we had about a month off before she flew to Korea, flew to Seoul to finish up the rest of the shooting. And so we worked that whole time. We developed a little bit of a rapport and a relationship and a language together. And I think she also learned a lot. Like she learned a lot about what she was shooting and what was working and what wasn't working. Because she went into the Korean shoot like feeling much more confident and much more prepared to try different things, make decisions. So she always says like she feels great about everything they shot in Korea because she had learned all that stuff on set and then the cutting room with me. And I do remember I remember feeling great about all the stuff that was coming back in from New York, but they were definitely shooting a lot more coverage in New York. A lot like I think she was doing a lot of stuff just to like make sure she had it. And then once they got to Korea, I think she was feeling much more confident, like, okay, I know exactly what I want. And I can shoot this, this, and this, right? Having it not be all in one go and having that time to kind of stop and reflect, I think definitely made the Korean stuff more, powerful and impactful. For my experience, her and my relationship really got solidified during those 4 weeks that we worked together. And then she and I worked remotely while she was in Korea shooting. Like that was when we actually started, like while she was shooting the New York stuff, we weren't really working much together at all. I was just kind of doing my assembly, but once she was in Korea, that's, she and I would work together in the morning and at night in between her shoots. And I felt really good about, our relationship at that point. So
I guess we were sharing early edits, right? And she was already like reviewing them and so on while still shooting in Korea.
When they had wrapped up the New York shoot, she came up to, my house, which is where I edited out of. And that's when I showed her an assembly of what she had shot. Which I also think was a little helpful. Sometimes it's tough when you show someone like an assembly of a full film and you're like, hey, here you go. Here's your movie. What do you think? It's so nerve-wracking on my end because I just feel like I hate presenting somebody's movie to them.
Sure is.
It's much easier to show like a partial cut. Like, hey, here's a work in progress. We don't have all the scenes. If it doesn't work, it's not my fault. It's just because we don't have everything. It makes the process a little easier. And I think it was, and it was a jolt to her. It's always a jolt to every director when they see their first assembly, because it's not, it's not good. It's not working. Not yet. And so there was a lot of conversations like, all right, don't, this happens every time. You just got to trust the process. We'll get there, I promise. So we weren't working together at all before then. But after that point, that's when like she felt comfortable. That's when I started sharing cuts with her, pretty much every day, basically.
Working on a project like this, which is a big project, it takes quite a long time. How do you manage your well-being and your family and stuff like that?
The two things I try to protect in the morning, because I have 2 young kids, and so most of my life is just work and then whatever they need. But the two things I try to protect for myself is I go to the gym every other day, and then I do a lot of running, and I just find like that's something I've actually started in the last 2 years, and it's just incredibly important for me. And if I don't do it, I feel like you're sitting in a chair all day. You feel your body feels terrible. I'm also getting older, and I just turned 40 this year. And so I'm like, okay, my body needs to move more. And then like, I have to take a shower every day. Now that doesn't seem like that much of a thing, but when you have kids, especially like when kids come along, sometimes personal hygiene kind of falls to the wayside because you're just trying to get that stuff together. And definitely when they were first born, I was like, oh my God, has it been a week and I haven't showered? What's happened? But now I'm like very much like, no, I know it on the dot when I'm going to go into the bathroom to take my shower. That's my time. I often also think like I have a lot of thoughts in the shower, and like sometimes in regards to work, these are very important things to me. And then aside from that, I try to take breaks every hour or so. I get up and walk around. It's a lot easier when I'm at home. I do a lot of editing from home. And, I live up in the suburbs, so it's very easy for me to go on a walk or step outside or take my dog outside. When I'm actually in the office, it's a little bit more challenging, but my favorite thing to do in the editing room is when we hit a wall, when we have like an issue or a problem that we don't know how to solve, is to stop working and just talk to each other. Like Celine and I had a lot of really great conversations on both of these films. And a lot of times we'll talk about movies that we love or things that we saw, feelings that we have about certain directors or films. A lot of times those conversations will produce ideas for how to solve certain issues that we're having in the cut. So it's just having that kind of like, person-to-person contact I think is very, very useful. So I'm not just like focused on the keyboard and the Avid all the time, every day. So yeah,
slowing down as a way to actually move forward. Yeah, man, I hope we get to do it again. Maybe on Materialists.
It's been my pleasure talking to you. And yeah, anytime. I'd love to come back and talk about Materialists once that comes out.